For years now, I have marked down all the books that I've read in the year, and why not do a tier list of all the books I've read. Starting off is also, it's including novels, graphic novels, visual novels. It's also counts non-fiction. The first book I read this year, The Shining by Stephen King. This was not the first book I read by Stephen King, but it's definitely one of the first books I've read by him. I'm not sure if I'd put it in A or S. Maybe S. I might put it in A, actually. Much better than the movie. The next book I read was Walking Dead Compendium 2, which is a second quarter of Walking Dead comics. I don't know, the Walking Dead comics are pretty good. I'd put them in C, probably. They're not, like, amazing, but they're like, really fun. Third, Inside Out by Nick Mason, the drummer of Pink Floyd. And it's like a biography of Pink Floyd, kind of, but it focuses heavily on the early years with, like, Syd Barrett and stuff. I didn't think it was amazing. I thought it was fine. But I wouldn't say it was the most enjoyable read. I thought it was quite dry a lot of the time, so I might put that in D. Then Cujo by Stephen King. I read that. I did not really like Cujo that much. I thought it was very bland. I thought the plot was a little bit off and strange. I didn't care about any of the characters. Which is really weird because Stephen King's usually really cool at making interesting characters. But no, I put that in E. Then I read Japan, A Foreign Place, which is for the pretty relatively unknown band Japan. It's a biography of them. And this book was really cool. It's really informative. I thought that it had some really cool insight into the band of Japan. I just think that the writing was really boring. So I'm going to put this in D with Inside Out. And I read Psycholonials by Andrew Hussey. I got this on Steam. It's like a visual novel. It's Andrew Hussey did Homestuck, and I did quite like Homestuck. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but it's pretty cool. Psycholonials might even be better than Homestuck. It's pretty fun, very unserious, very chill. I honestly really enjoyed my time with Psycholonials. I might put that in B, which maybe shows my lack of taste. But then we had Quinn 3D, which is by Brian May, and that's an autobiography of Brian May. But the cool thing about this is that so he takes 3D pictures, and you use a little like lens thing that he includes in the book to view them, and they're like 3D pictures, and that's really cool. I thought that was a really awesome way of doing a biography and actually like showing a lot of like his life through 3D pictures. I really enjoyed that. I might put that in C. Oh, and then we had Doctor Sleep, one of my favourite books. That might be my third favourite book ever. I love Doctor Sleep. I love The Shining, and I was like so excited because I've heard that it had a sequel. I read Doctor Sleep. I was blown away. It was so good. It was like so much better than The Shining. And maybe it was because like I was riding off the hype of The Shining. Like maybe if I reread them again, I might be different. I thought Doctor Sleep was really good. I thought the story was really engaging, and I loved it. And I really liked the lesbian representation. That was pretty good. Maybe it wasn't the best representation, but it was pretty good. Next, I read my first ever Terry Pratchett book, The Colour of Magic. I thought it was alright. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really care for it. I'm gonna put it in E. Maybe it's just not my thing. I thought there was just so much thrown at you, and it wasn't too riveting. Discworld seems like really cool, but I don't think it was a particularly great one to start with. Pet Sematary, I loved. I read that in a single day. Pet Sematary, another one of my absolute favourite books. I think I'd put Doctor Sleep over it, but I'm not sure, honestly. I thought Pet Sematary was fantastic. Absolutely incredible, captivating read. The Shining and Pet Sematary are the only books ever to give me chills. I'm not really like one to be super shaken by books, but that gave me chills. The ending of Pet Sematary gave me so many chills. That was so good. And the scariest chapter I've ever read is the one where Danny is in that room. I can't even remember what the number is, but when he goes into the room, that gave me so many chills. That was so good. That's the scariest like part of the book I've ever read. Next, I read A Summer's End. This is like a lesbian visual novel. It was alright. It really did fall into the sort of like tropes of being like it was really cool visually, but it had the sort of thing where it's like lesbian couples meeting because like they get into a relationship because one of them like sexually assaults the other, and that's like a kind of common trope in a lot of lesbian media, and it's just it's a bit lame. I didn't dislike it, but I think I'd put it in D. And then after that, I read Steins Gate: A Summer's End, and my friend got this for me a couple years ago because I love Steins Gate. I think Steins Gate, the original visual novel, is fantastic. Steins Gate Zero is a fantastic story. There's some definite stupid crap going on with the like, or just general anime stuff that just ruins a lot of media. but they were fine. Like, the story was so good, it, like, didn't matter. This was basically all fan service, and it sucked. That's an F. It was just bad. Then I read Unnatural Magic by C.M. Waggoner. This was alright as well. It's a lot like the Terry Pratchett novel I read. I thought it was slightly better. I think I'd put it in D. I wasn't, like, super captivated by it because it just wasn't for me, I guess. I've heard the second book she wrote was a lot more up my alley, so I'm going to check that one out. Then I got the Animated Survival Kit. I've read this before as well. Brilliant book if you're an animator like me. I mean, realistically, I should put it in S, but I'm going to judge it based on enjoyability to read. I'm going to say C. It's a fantastic book. Like, it's invaluable, but I'd say it's a C level enjoyability. I've reread the Freddy Fazbear books, or rather, I've reread the first one and read the second two. I don't think these books are that great. I'd say the Silver Eyes maybe an E, and the other two maybe Fs. They're fine. They're just kind of trash. Like, I love FNAF, but they're not that great. And I hate the fact that, like, in the Silver Eyes, the last 100 pages is literally just, like, them escaping the animatronics, and it goes on forever and ever, and it drags on. And this is the same for, like, every book. It's just really random. And then I reread Nichijou. I love Nichijou so much. I wouldn't say it's as good as the show, though. I'd probably put it in B. Finished Initial D, finally. I started this, I was in year 9, so I must have been, like, when I was, like, what, 12, maybe? I read them in the back of history class. Only ever read up to chapter 40. I just didn't read the rest of them. Initial D's fine. I'd put it in D. Then I read the Disney Studio story, and this is another quite cool book, although it felt very doctored by Disney in a way. There were a couple inconsistencies. They seemed a bit, like, insincere, but it was a cool read. I'd put this probably in C, and then I reread for all the Harry Potter books. I actually have the special illustrated editions. I wouldn't say they're, like, peak fiction, but they're definitely quite good. I'd say Philosopher's Stone, probably a C tier book. Chamber of Secrets, probably slightly better. Prison of Azkaban's definitely a lot better, a lot stronger. The plot's a lot less kiddie, and it's a lot more, like, focused on relationships, which is cool. I'd say The Goblet of Fire is an E tier. I think that's a really boring book. It's quite dull at times. It's very much focused on the task. The story's a lot more messy. The Order of Phoenix, second best Harry Potter book. Probably in B, I'd say. And The Half-Blood Prince is peak Harry Potter. Actual, genuinely, really cool book. It's one of the best children's literature books ever written, I think. I think it's really good. I think it sets up the story well. And I think Deathly Hallows is trash. It's awful. It's still better than those 3 pieces of crap. It's like the biggest fail in, like, making an interesting story whatsoever. Like, The Half-Blood Prince is so good for what it is. Like, for a kid's book, it's amazing. Like, it has some really cool ideas and themes, and it does some, like, it's got, the finale has, like, some, like, really cool horror elements to it. And then they just, like, set up all this cool stuff, and it's just disappointing. The first, like, half of the book, they're just stumbling around a forest, getting angry at each other. And then the second half of the book, they just do everything in, like, 200 pages that they've been building up for, like, books. It's just a bit of a boring book. It's not super egregious because it's a kid's book at the end of the day. It's just so disappointing when, like, the rest of the books, they're actually really good kids books. Like, you can't put them on the same level as adult books. It's why it's so stupid when people say Harry Potter's bad because, like, the writing's bad or whatever, because it's written for kids at the end of the day. Like, the story's really quite cool at times, but it's written for kids. It doesn't make it, it's not supposed to be like, you know, Shakespeare or whatever. I love Salem's Lot so much. Maybe a high A. I don't think it's quite on the level of Pet Sematary or Dr. Sleep, but it was a hell of a good book. He just slow burns so well, Stephen King. I know it's not like some, like, hot take that Stephen King's a good author, but, like, he really does. He does know how to write a story. I read his short story collection, Full Dark No Stars, I believe it's called, next, and it was fine. Probably at the top of D tier. I think the first story was particularly good. Enjoyment-wise, I think the book as a whole just was a bit too inconsistent, but then I don't like short story compilations that much, so that's probably just a me thing. And then I read The Stand. I think The Stand is very good. It's incredibly ambitious, but it is also a bit too long. Probably the top of B. It could even fit at the end of A tier, but it's just, because of the length, I did love reading The Stand, and I took a whole month to read it because it's like 1,400 pages long because I had the extended edition. It wasn't his best book by any means because it was just it dragged on a bit. And it just wasn't it wasn't as strong storytelling wise, I don't think. Then I read The Book Thief. It was fantastic. I know that's not also not a hot take. Fantastic piece of literature. Probably S tier. I had Contest by Matthew Riley, which my dad wanted me to read. It was a lot like Jurassic Park, to be honest. Pretty good book. Very, very pulpy, though. It was like a Battle Royale, kind of, but like it was like set with, it was different enough that it didn't feel like it was like ripping it off like the Hunger Games did, and also it was released in the same year. It was different enough. I mean, there was only 7 contestants, and they were all from different species from around the galaxy, and it wasn't really that much like Battle Royale, to be honest, but it was vaguely like it. I'd say it's probably end of C tier. After that, I read The Time Traveler's Wife. Best book I've read this year. It was so good. I cried probably multiple times. It was so powerful, that book. That was incredible. If you haven't read The Time Traveler's Wife, read The Time Traveler's Wife. It is so clever and so fantastic and so emotional. Fantastic romance, really clever. It was just fantastic. It was brilliant. Then I read Little Women. Little Women was a very enjoyable read as well. I put it in A tier. Little Women, very very fun. It's like a slice of life. The first one ever, I guess. And Good Wives too. Good Wives is like basically just a like direct sequel to Little Women, and it's basically the same. But I did think the ending was a little bit disappointing. Just a little bit. I think it could have worked out better a different way with different romance routes and stuff. It's fine. Like, it's I get why they did it. Little Men, on the other hand, wasn't very good. Little Men was a bit sucky. It was a complete change of direction from the first 2 books. It was a much more childish direction, and it was very boring. Same with Jo's Boys, to be honest. I think it was slightly better than Little Men, but not that much better. It makes no sense for Jo to open a school. She does not seem the character to have the patience to do that. She seems like she should have not just thrown away her dream. She should have actually like gone ahead and followed her dream of being a writer, and she should have done things that were actually in character for herself. She changed into a completely different character. I think I put Jo's Boys slightly higher because it starts off with the actual characters you know and love, and not with the random little boys who you don't really care about. Very, very frustrating because it was so good. Little Women and Good Wives, and Little Men and Jo's Boys are just so boring and flat and childish, and they have nothing interesting going on. I read Coraline after Jo's Boys. Really quite good. It's nowhere near as good as the animation. It's probably one of the best children's books I've ever read. Probably it would have been my favourite book if I read it as a kid. Then I read I'm Brian Wilson. I got really into the Beach Boys this year. Pretty good book, pretty good biography. It was a little bit directionless. I wouldn't say it's as good as Queen and 3D, but it's like kind of on level, to be honest. Then I read Dracula. Dracula is an A-tier book, on par with Little Women and Good Wives. I love Dracula. I want to read it after I read Salem's Lot, and it did not disappoint. It was a little slow at times, and the best bit probably was the very first 5 chapters, to be honest. Of Mice and Men, another A-tier book, maybe before Dracula, just because it was so powerful. Very, very well written, very cool. Oh, and then I read Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is a fantastic book. It's literally peak children's fiction. It is so funny. It's so good because it's like Douglas Adamsy. It's like clever humour that kids can also understand. I love Winnie the Pooh. I'd probably put them on A. They're really, really good books. The other 2 are just basically verse. I don't think they're great. I just read them because they're really short, and I thought I might as well read the rest of the collection. So they had a couple interesting poems in there, but they're just poems for kids at the end of the day, and they're not that interesting. Winnie the Pooh and House at Pooh Corner, they're really, really good books. If you have not read them, you really need to read them. It seems silly saying this because they're like children's books, but they're really, really clever, and they're really well done, and children's books aren't treated with the same sort of care as they were back then. They like treat kids like they're smart. Then I read The Woman in Black. Kind of disappointed me. Bit boring. Not much happened. It was like, I thought it was funny because it was like the whole time he was like, ooh, the scary horrors. You would not believe my horror at what happened. And then it's like a box would move like 2 inches and it'd be like, a spooky ghost. I'd say it's in a D tier, really. A little bit boring. Frankenstein was cool. I did struggle with Frankenstein a little bit because Frankenstein, pretty arduous to read, I thought. It was incredibly clunky, the language used. Like, I really love the themes of Frankenstein. I love the story of Frankenstein. And I thought it was really cool, like as a book to analyse, but it was to read, I didn't really enjoy it that much. I thought it was, language used was incredibly clunky for no good reason. Because I understood every single word on the page, it just, they didn't fit nicely together. It had no flow. That's what I love about Stephen King, his flow is impeccable. So he can turn, like, the most, like, dull story into something really quite interesting to read. It had no rhythm to it, so I'm putting it at the end of B. Then I read Walt Disney the Biography by Neil Gabler. Best biography ever. Really well written. Best written biography I've ever read. Very comprehensive as well. The amount of information packed into this thing is insane. Then I read the Scott Pilgrim comics. I wouldn't say they're like peak fiction. I'd say they were very enjoyable though. I think the TV show was better that came out this year. Possibly put them mid-C. And then finally, I just finished reading this like a couple days ago. Fluke by James Herbert. Pretty cool book. I thought it would be like Cujo, to be honest. I think I'd put it like in D tier. It's better than Cujo, but really it was a cool book. I liked it. There was like a lot of filler. This is kind of what my ranking would be. Thank you so much for watching my tier list, and goodbye.